In the autumn of 1990, heavy gray clouds hung over the Rostov region. Rain fell for weeks without stopping. Trees stood like black silhouettes beside the railway tracks, while cold winds pushed dead leaves and scraps of newspapers across empty platforms. People hurried home before dark. Shops closed early. Streets that once felt ordinary suddenly seemed different. Nobody spoke openly about it. Not officially, but everyone knew something was wrong. Rumors moved through towns and villages like a disease. Stories were whispered in kitchens, shared at bus stops, passed between neighbors. Children had disappeared. Young women had vanished without a trace. Bodies had been discovered in remote forest belts near railway lines. And somewhere out there, people said a man walked among them. A man who seemed to emerge from darkness itself. A man who always disappeared before anyone could stop him. Back then, few people knew his name. But fear already did. And fear was spreading. One evening, a small train station sat almost empty beneath a darkening sky. An old woman rested on a wooden bench. A man smoked beside a rusted pole. A teenager listened to music through a battered cassette player. And among them stood an ordinary-looking man. Average height, average build, average clothes. Nothing memorable, nothing unusual, nothing threatening. The kind of face you would forget within minutes. The kind of person who blended perfectly into a crowd. People rarely pay attention to someone like that, and that was exactly why he seemed safe. He watched the people around him quietly. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he started conversations. Nobody thought twice about him, because evil rarely looks like evil. More often, it looks like a neighbor, a coworker, a fellow passenger, someone who appears completely harmless. At first, nobody panicked. People disappeared from time to time. Some left town. Some ran away. Some became victims of ordinary crimes. But eventually, the numbers became impossible to ignore. Investigators began noticing patterns. The same kinds of locations kept appearing. Forest belts, abandoned fields, railway embankments, places where few people ever went, places where silence felt unnatural. Discoveries were made by accident. A worker walking home, a mushroom picker, a child exploring the woods. Each discovery left a mark on those who found it. Some carried the memories for years. Some struggled to sleep afterward. Others refused to walk through forests even during daylight, because fear has a way of staying with people, especially when they encounter something they cannot understand. When answers are missing, people create their own. Some believed the killer was a former soldier. Others claimed he was an escaped psychiatric patient. A few insisted there must be an organized group responsible. Every person had a theory. Every theory felt easier to accept than the truth, because nobody wanted to believe one man could cause so much terror. Yet that was exactly what was happening. Somewhere among ordinary citizens lived the man investigators desperately searched for. He walked the same streets, shopped in the same stores, rode the same trains, and every day he heard people discussing the crimes he himself had committed. Imagine a cold evening. The platform is nearly empty. Only half the lamps still work. The sound of electrical wires hums softly in the darkness. A train can be heard somewhere in the distance. A stranger stands beside you. He smiles politely, asks for the time, asks where you're traveling, makes casual conversation. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious, just an ordinary encounter. But danger rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with warning signs. It arrives quietly, almost invisibly, like a shadow moving through the night. The investigation reached dead ends again and again. Hundreds of people were questioned. Thousands of leads were examined. Surveillance operations were organized. Investigators worked late into the night, yet the killer remained free. It often seemed as though he was one step ahead, as if he somehow knew where they would search next, as if he understood the investigation better than the investigators themselves. Years passed. The pressure grew. Frustration turned into exhaustion, and exhaustion slowly became fear. Some officers began to feel they were chasing a ghost, a man who appeared only long enough to leave devastation behind, a man who vanished before anyone could stop him. Of course, they knew he was real, but reality can become frighteningly similar to a nightmare when there are no answers. Meanwhile, ordinary life continued. Children attended school. Workers went to factories. Families gathered around dinner tables. People laughed, made plans, dreamed about the future. And none of them knew that nearby lived a man leading a completely different life, a double life. During the day, he appeared ordinary. At night, he became something else entirely. That thought is more frightening than any horror movie, because monsters are supposed to look like monsters. They are supposed to stand out. They are supposed to be recognizable. But real monsters rarely do, and that is what makes them terrifying. Some investigators later described an unsettling feeling at certain crime scenes. Not something supernatural, not a ghost story, just a feeling, as if the forest itself remembered, as if the silence carried echoes of what had happened there, especially at night, when the wind moved through the branches, when shadows shifted between the trees, when every crack of a twig sounded louder than it should. Those places changed people, even if they stayed there for only a few minutes. The human mind has a strange relationship with tragedy. Sometimes it can feel its presence long after the event itself has passed. Say, the years continued to pass. Case files multiplied. Entire rooms filled with paperwork. Photographs were organized into archives. Witness statements stretched across thousands of pages. Maps covered walls. Pins marked locations. Connections were drawn. Patterns emerged. Yet one question remained unanswered. Who was he? Where was he now? When would he strike again? When suddenly a break interrupted his path again. Every day meant another possibility, another chance for fear to spread. Eventually, the breakthrough came. And when the suspect was finally identified, many people were shocked. They expected someone different, someone who looked dangerous, someone who appeared evil. Instead, they saw an ordinary man, a painfully ordinary man. That was the most terrifying part. He did not look like a nightmare. He looked like anyone else, a neighbor, a coworker, a stranger standing beside you on a train platform. At that moment, many people realized something deeply unsettling. Sometimes evil does not hide in darkness. Sometimes it walks openly among us, completely unnoticed. After the arrest, details slowly emerged. Investigators reconstructed years of events, piece by piece, document by document, interview by interview. And the more they learned, the more disturbing the full picture became. This had not been a single crime, not a brief moment of madness, not an isolated incident. It was a years-long nightmare that had affected countless lives. Families had spent years searching for answers. Communities had lived under a cloud of fear. Entire generations remembered the anxiety of that period. The arrest ended the search, but it could not erase what had already happened. The most lasting legacy of the case was not the killer himself. It was the fear he left behind. The fear of parents watching their children walk to school. The fear of people returning home after dark. The fear of trusting the wrong person. Because after a story like this, the world no longer feels quite the same. You look more carefully at strangers. You become more aware of your surroundings. You wonder how much you truly know about the people around you. And sometimes, late at night, you find yourself asking a question that has no easy answer. How well do we really know anyone? Picture one final scene. A deserted train platform, late at night, rain glistens on the pavement. A lone street lamp flickers above the tracks. Fog drifts slowly through the darkness. Somewhere far away, a train horn echoes. The station appears completely empty. Then you notice a figure standing in the distance, motionless, silent, only a silhouette. You blink, and the figure is gone. Perhaps it was only your imagination. Perhaps. But that is how fear works. It remains long after the danger has disappeared. It survives in memories, in old newspaper clippings, in forgotten railway stations, in stories passed from one generation to the next, and in the realization that the most frightening monsters do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like ordinary people, and that is far more terrifying than any legend, because legends end when the story is over. But real fear has a way of lingering, long after the screen goes dark, long after the video ends, long after silence returns. And if the wind outside your window sounds a little louder tonight, you may simply remember this story. The story of a man who hid among ordinary people for years. A story that serves as a reminder: the darkest horrors are not born in haunted houses, not in abandoned forests, not in ancient myths. Sometimes they are born inside human beings, and that is why they are so difficult to see.